4, Book of Lamentation, Book of Eicha, it's a different chapter. It's no longer the agenda of the faith, description of the destruction of Jerusalem. Very different. In this chapter, it's what exactly happened to people. And even it's a very harsh description. One may divide the chapter to at least two different segments. One is the people of Jerusalem. The second one is the certain behavior of the enemies, how they behave in a certain time, which is a lot to learn. So in other words, the first chapter dealing with Jerusalem, the second and the third dealing with a lot of faith issues. But here it's really zooming in the destructions and what happened to people. In my childhood, I had the privilege to talk with relatively many survivors of the Shoah. People who carry numbers, people who went firsthand to the war. And yes, there are many stories, personal stories involved. But usually, one of the great frustrations that they have is at the time of war, people behavior, including behavior toward people with their own best friend, with their own immediate family, change during the time of crisis. So, if we try to divide this chapter, the first 11 psukim, 11 sentences, it's a very harsh description, while the center part is sentence 6, pasuk vav, but then is a description of the other side, of the ruler. This kina, this lament, according to Rashi, was for the King Yoshiyahu, which we will talk a little later. King Yoshiyahu, in one hand, was a penitent, was a righteous man. Rashi, however, pointed out in several places that he did not listen to the word of the prophet Jeremiah. Jeremiah warned him not to go together with the Egyptians. At that time, and we elaborate later, it was a war between two empires, the empire of Babylon and the empire of Egypt. Yoshiyahu, as a king, he said, there is a sentence that said in the Torah, a sword shall not pass to your land. And since the Torah said it, and people make teshuvah according to Yoshiyahu, he was searched for the idols, he felt that he annihilated the idol. The truth is people cheated him, soon you see how. But he felt that since he's no longer idol worshipper, therefore our spirit is used here, Ruach Hapeinu Meshiach Hashem, which means it will be fine. He did not take Jeremiah seriously. First sentence is Eicha. Eicha, we mentioned earlier, is a word like Ayeka, where people ask, how come this happened? Eicha yu'am zahav, yishnei aketem atov. The zahav is a sign of finest gold. It's a description, it's a metaphoric description of people righteous people who live in the holy city of Yerushalayim. How come tishtapechna avnei kodesh, sacred stones applied to righteous people, are scattered at every street corner? Rashi described the blood of Yoshiyahu. There are two ways to describe this sentence. One is the midrashic way, that the poverty was so high that the great sages had no way but to close all the books and search for some way to make a living, and it was close to impossible. Really, lack of food by all means. בני ציון העיקרים המסולאים בפז. בני ציון, it's the description of people who live in Yerushalayim, that they are like who are comfortable to fine gold. From the extreme of the fine gold, alas, are now treated like earthen jars, work of a potter, like cheres, like nothing, from the very high to the very low. 3 very strong sentences. Gam tanim chaltsu, even tanim. Tanim, it's a description of one of those animals, is different animals. Generally, it's the wild animals. It's not clear what is a tanim. Chaltsu shad heniku gureihen. So tanim, it's a description of the vicious animals, but Rashi here explained that the word, the meaning of the tanim, which is again, it's a very af al pi she'achzarihu, even the tanim is a very mean animal, he said, vicious. They display warmth and kindness to the young by nursing them. Here Yirmiyahu expressed his lamentation. He said, because it was a high level of famine, even passionate Jewish mothers became cruel and placed their own lives before their children's. They consumed whatever food was available and allowed, Rashi said, their children to go hungry, ignoring their cry for food. Hard to believe. That's one point of Rashi. People lose their whole human image, their whole image of God. The truth is, as we said, that when you talk to people who survived the Shoah, yes, there are exceptions, but in general, when you talk heart to heart in a person, one of the things that still stay in their brain, in their mind, is the fact that they couldn't get out of this vicious cycle of not being different instead of being selfish, because the strive to survive the day supersede any other needs. Davak leshon yonek el chiko batzama, the tongue of the suckling cleaves to his palate for thirst. Young children beg for bread, no one extended to them. So there are two ways to understand it. One, it was such a dearth, such a famine, that it wasn't even a water. And usually children is expression of someone who's innocent. And when they ask for food, you make an arduous effort to somehow provide them with some type of food. But there's no one to express compassion, because either you say that is nothing to give, or you say that people unfortunately turn to be selfish. When I studied psychology years back, I remember one of the research at the university was research over people who went through trauma. People who went through a tremendous trauma, different level of trauma. So they interview some soldiers that came at that time, early from Iraq, from the time of the war. So they interview soldiers, like they go 2 soldiers as a pair to a mission, or 3 soldiers to a mission, and it's shooting from all over, and 1 soldier gets hit. Imagine a situation, there are 2 soldiers, one of them gets hit with bullets. What exactly happened to the other soldier? Very fascinating research. What happened, which is again human behavior, human study, the first reaction when they have statistics among so many, is some type of act of happiness. The bullets did not hit me. This is my best friend who's fighting together with me, yet the bullet did not hit me. And then, even he helped his friend. When he come home, he has this complex. He needs all this psychological healing, a long healing process. Even he carry his wounded friend to the helicopter with all his body was soaked with blood, and he ran miles and miles to carry him to a helicopter, and he tried to help him. But earlier, several hours earlier, it was shooting, and his friend was get the bullet and not him. And on the top of that, when he carried his friend on his shoulder, one of the snipers from top of the hill continued to shoot, and his friend, while he was wounded, used his rifle to shoot back the sniper and to kill him. Now he carried his friend to the helicopter, and he's soaked with blood. And now he has this complex within himself, which is, he feel bad that he, in the heart of heart, was happy that the bullet did not hit him, it hits his friend. האוכלים למעדנים, sentence 5. Those who feast extravagantly, נשמו בחוצות, lie destitute in the street. האמונים עלי תולה, those who are brought up in sackcloth clothing, wallow garbage. People who get used to walk on the carpets, now they search in the garbage. Usually what happened, you see when they sometimes very rich people throw a good food or good stuff in the garbage. So you see, unfortunately, to this very day in some section in the world, that there are some homeless people who go to the garbage and search for food that the rich people throw away. So those, he said, fastidious people who get used to a certain lifestyle, they suffer more than the others. Because at the beginning of the process of famine, it was in a way easy on the poor, but much harder on the rich. There is several Talmudic texts that speak about it. For example, there is a Talmud described in several locations the famine. Read, for example, Gittin 57-58. Reads the famine that was described in several other tractates, Batra, Taanit. It's unbelievable description beyond words of famine. And he used here the word alei tola chibku ashpatot, which means even people who get used to fancy garments, now they bear their head in a garbage to find some piece of bread. Now is the key pasuk, which I told you earlier, is the key pasuk for the whole chapter. Vav. Vayigdal avon bat ami mechatat Sodom hahafucha kemo raga velo chalu vayadayim. The iniquity of the daughter of my people, which means that its description of people in Jerusalem, is greater than the sin of Sodom, which was overturned in a moment without mortal hands being laid on her. Meaning, if you try to juxtapose the crisis that befall upon the people of Jerusalem versus the crisis that the book of Genesis describes with city of Sodom and Gomorrah, Jerusalem suffered harder, much harder, by no comparison to Sodom. Meaning, if a person have a choice of death, God forbid, it's better to die in Sodom than die in Jerusalem at that time. They use the word here, hahafucha kemoraga, that to destroy Sodom, the Torah said that it happened just in one time, in one shot. the greatest part was the cruelty of the enemy that was much worse than Sodom. Sodom, one-time punishment, destruction, that's it. Here, it was a tremendous act of cruelty involved with the enemies, which shows us, in a way, that the sin of this Jerusalem was much severe and serious than the sin of Sodom. If you think about, for example, a big bomb, what's the big theory? If, God forbid, a big bomb hits any place, where is the best place to escape? Very close to the place that the bomb was. So in that sense, Sodom, in our language, is like, where is the bomb? Jerusalem is the virus that involved with death. What do I mean by that? The key description in this painful sentence 6 describe a process of demise, process of death, that is go through a level of deterioration throughout a long period of time, involve diseases, famine, huge poverty, lack of even water, a rape, the leadership falling apart, and it's such a level of deterioration that is worse than one-time death, like Sodom. And that's the key sentence in the whole book. Because from this point and onward, he described certain patterns, certain behavior, especially from sentence 11. It's a relatively short chapter. Describe the behavior of the enemies. 7. Zaku nezirea misheleg, tzachu mechalav. The two explanations in this sentence. In a simple way, he said, her princes were purer than snow, whiter than milk. Again, meaning the people who are ministers, the head, right? They have a very good lifestyles, so everything turn around. That's one way. You can go in a different direction. It's applied to the, as we said, the level of deterioration. That from the white, red, turn around to different direction. 8. Chashach mishchoch ta'oram. What happened? Their appearance has become darker and blacker than soot. They are not recognized in the streets. Their skin was shivered on the bones. It became dry as wood. If you see stories of people in Auschwitz, there is a process. First is the skin that have some type of color. And what happened to human body when it's a great famine, the fat part of the body was eaten by the other part of the body as a reserve part. If you read stories of the Shoah, you see how prisoners did not recognize each other after a certain time of poverty, because the body ate himself in the famine. The Midrash tells us about the great Rabbi Tzadok that fasts. It's hard for us to understand, for 40 years, and after all the destructions, they came and tried to heal him, but his skin remained in a certain way even he was healed. You see, regular people, when they go to a tremendous sudden diet process, that something happened to the skin. There is a huge change in their skins. You see that in some cases. Tovim ayu chalalei cherev michalalei ra'av. Sentence 9 is like horrific. He said, more fortunate were victims of the sword than the victim of famine. What does that mean? Either in a simple way, a person get killed one time by sword and it's over, versus a suffering, go to a period of tremendous physical and emotional suffering until death taking place. For they pine away, stricken, lacking of fruits, the fruit of the field. So there are two ways to explain it. There is a Rashi here Rashi said something that it's a little bit ambiguous. It's some type of mind-boggling to understand. Rashi said, sentence 9, I read and translate, חללי הרעב היו נפוחים מריח תנובות השדה. That the people who died, the body was a very, if you see a pregnant woman in a very advanced pregnancy, the body goes in a several different size, meaning part of the body is big and part of the body is a regular size, right? The stomach is large. Here he speaks about והריח נכנס לתוך נפוחי הרעב וקרסם נדבקת, which means the people who are at the time of close to their demise, while they're smelling the food of the enemies, their stomach turned bigger and bigger, and then it's like blow up the stomach and they die. And he called it זה מיתת ניבול יותר מהרוגי חבר. That's worse death than dying by the sword. That's Rashi. If you go to the Holocaust Museum, you see description, you see pictures of some prisoners, what happened to them after certain times, that the intestines and the body, how it changed. They changed tremendously. You think about, for example, animals, certain animals. They eating certain herbs or corns and things like that. When they eat too much, the system carry a gas, and sometimes there is a serious kashrut issues, because what happened is the veterinarians need to put a hole in their system in order for them to survive, especially big animal like cow, and then it's a questions of their both the milk and or the body, right? Because that hole that the veterinarian put in their system saved their lives. So there are several ways to see it. There is one way, as the Rashi said here, is another way. They said here, shehem yazuvu medukarim mitnuvot sadai. Medukarim. So I heard from one of my teacher, Rabbi Schwartz, who said that it was either typhus that killed them, or certain very high level of diarrhea that create their death. But anyway, he speaks about very severe death. 10 is a horrific sentence. 10th, ידי נשים רחמניות בישלו ילדיהן. Hands of compassionate women have boiled their own children. They became their food when the daughter of my people was shattered. Two ways to see it. Two ways the rabbis see this pasuk. One is the literal interpretation, which is fulfillment what the Torah said in the series of admonition. People just lost the image of God, almost like in our language, like cannibals, eating the flesh of their own children. Survivor, like the book of Job described, my life take precedence before anybody else's life. The Midrash goes different direction, and the truth is I'm more comfortable with the Midrash. The Midrash said that it was the righteous women that they save a special food for their children, yet since the neighbor lost their loved one, as you know, there is a concept when people return from a cemetery, they're not supposed to eat their own food. We need to prepare a special meal for the mourners upon returning from a cemetery the first day. That's part of act of community who participate with the mourners. So this Midrash said that that's the greatness of those righteous women, that whatever food left in their home that's supposed to be for their own children, they gave it to the neighbors as an act of comfort to encourage them. And the reason that they use here the word bishlu yaldehem, boil their own children, they use the word ma'aleh alehem hakatuv ke'ilu bishlu, it's considering such a high level of righteousness, it's like, in a sense, that they boil their own children. If you look at the story of the war, for example, World War II, on one hand, it was a lot of stories about righteous women, tremendous righteousness, that they have the devotion to save other people. And you have the others. The rabbis tells us that Mitzvah Shem, when you see the future redemption, it's either come because the cruelty and the viciousness of people, or because of righteousness of the extremes. 11. כילה אדוני את חמתו, שפך ארון אפו, ויצת אש בציון ותאכל יסודותיה. Hashem vented his fury, he poured out his fierce anger, he kindled a fire in Zion which consumed its foundation. So one interpretation is God appear ostensibly that he wants to get rid of the nations. But many commentators hold no, that's expression of the last roughness of God, which means if you look carefully at the history of the Jewish people, how the communities will be able to rehabilitate themselves after the war. Look at the United States Jewish community, Israel Jewish community, South African Jewish community, England Jewish community, all after the Shoah will be able out of the ashes, the remnant, to rebuild families and communities. I can speak also in a small scale in my personal experiences. 5 years ago I went through an unbelievable, horrific accident, and if you, those of you familiar with the story, it's really beyond God's help how a person can rebuild himself from a certain situation. Here they speak about the foundation that was burned, which show the severity of the punishment. That it's like, the good news is that God expressed his anger against the stones, against the trees, which is again act of kindness. But if you want to go deeper, and that's the key sentence, I told you sentence 6 and 11 is the key sentence. This sentence, it's a very important sentence because it's applied to so many avenues in life. In that time, if you read Ezekiel chapter 11, for example, you read Jeremiah chapter 7, chapter 26, is a description of the false prophets. The false prophets tell the people, Omrim shalom ve'en shalom. They tell people, come on, it's not going to happen. God built the city of Jerusalem. God is the center of his covenant. It's not going to happen. Any type of destruction is not going to happen. And the fact that we are at this point temporarily are not strong against the enemy, God will never allow to destroy his house. What did they do? They took a prophet like Jeremiah, they put him in the jail, like in a pit, and they tortured him because they said, Jeremiah is the false prophet. He is wrong with his negative prophecy. No, it's not going to happen to us. This is the center of Jerusalem. It's not going to happen. God is not going to allow that to happen. The truth of the matter, if you dig deeply, you see at the very beginning of Book of Samuel, the story how they brought the Aaron, the ark, to a place called Afek. They brought him, and it was the false prophet that said that since the ark is with us, and it's part of us, so that will protect us. Jeremiah said to them, Lechu na el mekomi shebeshilo ureu. He said to them, don't go that direction. I can show you in the past the destruction of Shiloh. It's already happened. The idea that you have this notion that since it's a temple and it's a build in Jerusalem, it was a good service and everything, doesn't give you a guarantee that that's going to happen in the future. Unfortunately, most of the people are very short-sighted, myopic. They're not able to see the long range of picture. They have a very narrow or a circumscribed view. they have lacking of discernments, they foresight or perceptive, they're not able to see the full picture. 12. לא האמינו מלכי ארץ כל יושבי תבל. The kings of the earth did not believe, nor did any of the world inhabitants, כי יבוא צר ואויב בשערי ירושלים, that the adversary or enemy could enter the gates of Jerusalem. So there are two ways to look at this. One, we said that our leader did not believe. Here we go to a new direction that he end up to the very end of this chapter. He speaks about the avenue of the others, the other nations. They hold that the Lord God of Israel will not allow to destroy the temple, either because they believe in the Lord of Israel, or they believe in each nation they have their own covenant with their own mighty God. But whatever they think, they knew in a way that God has the divine providence who in a miraculous way helped the Jewish people in their building and all the process from Egypt and all this history. And if you look at the story of the Titus, the Titus, the great Roman that made this big, humongous gate, the winning of Jerusalem, you can take in two different directions. Some said that he is an egomaniac, that Titus was have this type of mindset that he felt that I'm the winner of the war. But most of the commentators hold that no, he said like, God is using me as emissary. I'm just in a good side of God. I'm just doing what God expects me to do as a emissary of God. And that's horrific. Just to think, because they did not believe that they're going to win. Mechatot Neviah, now we try to explain the reasons. It was for the sins of her prophets, Avonot Kohanea, the iniquities of her priests, who had shed in their midst the blood of the righteous. Two ways. The most accepted ways explain that the priests bought their job, the head of the communities, they were voted by their assets, by the monies. That was the image of the people. You go by the story of the evil deed of King Manasseh, that he spilled so much blood. And the Torah said that the land is not going to atone if it was blood spilling on the land. So that's one way. There is another way to say that it was the attitude that the nation had toward its leader. But most of the rabbis hold that that's applied to the lack of good leadership. Now עיוורים בחוצות נועלו בדם. The people who are blind wandered to the streets, defiled with blood, so that none could touch their garments. Horrific sentence. What does that mean? It means that during the second era of the temple, it was a civil war within the Jewish communities. Jews killed Jews. Horrible in the city of Jerusalem. And it turned so bad that the blind people were stepping on dead bodies. They're filled with blood. That's what he said, soaked with blood, because of that. Now you said, all of this, what has to do with my life? I have a news for you. Let me share with you just some of the statements. And as some of you know, I have the privilege to be an officer in IDF, serve part of my time in the special forces, both in Lebanon, Gaza. Yet, still, to say such a statement, listen to this. Example. One of the leader of the Peace Now movement said, אם צריך, אני מוכן לירות למתנחל בין העיניים. If needed, I'll shoot a bullet between the eyes of a settler. Jew said against Jew. Another one, names. Very famous artist and sculptor יגאל תומרקין. כשאני רואה את החרדים אני מבין את הנאצים. When I see ultra-Orthodox Jews, I understand the Nazis. When I see them, I understand why it's a Holocaust. Another example, leader of the left party, Knesset member Ephraim Sneh. אם הברירה היא דמוקרטית או שפיכות דמים, אין להירתע מאלטלנה שנייה. We went through first Altelene when Jews killed Jews, and if there's no choice, we have to open fire against our brethren. אביב גפן, בואו נחזיר את כל המתנחלים חיים או מתים. We have to close all the settlements, life or death. General Shlomo Gazit, הקופות הסרוגות, people who wearing knit yarmulke, עבורי, to me, הם כמו צלב הקרס על השרוול של החיילים הנאצים. It's the same as the cross over the Nazi uniform. General Reserve Shlomo Gazit, IDF General. Statement, brothers against brothers. Israeli newspaper, Yediot Achronot. There are several settlements that not only need to be evicted, but we need to expunge them. צריך לרסס אותם ולהרוג את כולם. We have to get rid of all the people, not just the settlement. For me, to kill them, מבחינתי להרוג אותם זה בכלל לא נחשב להרוג בני אדם, אלא רק חיסול עשבים שוטים. It's not considering killing people, it's killing a bad weed in your grass. אורי אבנרי, הגיעה השעה לקבור אותם, it's a time, צריך להיכנס למאה שערים, we have to go to the Haredi sect, which is called מאה שערים, עם זחלמים ומקלעים ולרסס, and just kill all of them. עוזי אורנן, צריך לתלות את החרדים על עמודי חשמל. We have to kill all the ultra-Orthodox, put them at the top of the electrical wire and kill them, the same as the Nazis. Knesset member אבשלום וילם, צריך יהיה לשתק אותם באמצעות ירי כדי לפגוע. We have no choice but to get rid of them in guns and ammunition. אורנן יקותיאלי, צריך להיכנס למאה שערים ולרסס אותם. We have to go to the ultra-Orthodox sect and kill all of them. Now, without taking sides, those statements about the Haredim, about the settlers, if you tell me that all those horrific era, 2,000 years ago, the destruction of the second temple, and why we still not building the second temple, the distance between the first and the second was only 70 years. Here we are 2,000 years after destruction. And you talk about selfless hatred, here is the answer. The Midrash said that people who search for the Zachariah grave, since they kill him, they want to ask him for forgiveness, they understand it was a mistake. The Gemara tells us that the Zaradan slaughtered his body. And here, sentence 15, Suru tameh kur'u lamu, suru suru al tigau. They said to us, away, unclean one. Did you ever heard the statement, dirty Jew? People shouted at them, away, away, don't touch, for they are loathsome and wander about. The nation had said, they will not sojourn again. You look at the story of the Jews in the ghetto, they don't want them, they don't want to be part of them. Here in the capital of Maryland, go to this synagogue corridor and read story about the late Rabbi Rosenblatt and how he fought against all these statements in a yacht club, in many other locations. There's no entrance. I'm speaking not too many years ago, even at the 60s, early 70s. No entrance for Jews and dogs. No entrance for Negroes and Jews. פני אדוני חלקם לא יוסיף להביטם, פני כהנים לא נשאו וזקנים לא חוננו. The anger of the Lord has divided them, caring for them no longer. They showed no regard for the priests, no favor for the elders. Which means there are two ways to understand it. Either the enemies look upon the leadership and they're disrespectful to them, or we have lack of respect for the leadership. 17. עודנו תכלנה עינינו לעזרתנו הבל, בציפייתנו ציפינו אל גוי לא יושיע. Our eyes still strained in vain from our deliverance. In our expectations we watch for a nation that could not save. Since the king Yoshia waited for the Egypt, as we said earlier, Jeremiah said to Tzidkiah, the King Tzidkiah earlier, that he should abide by the Babylon. I'm sorry I said Yoshia, Tzidkiah. That he told Tzidkiah to abide by the Babylon. It was a war between two mighty empires, Babylon and Egypt. And Tzidkiah, as a king, he did not want to abide by that. He has a covenant with Pharaoh, and he was very adamant, even obstinate, to stay with the Egyptian empire. And he made covenant with them. Jeremiah told him, no, you have to abide, you have to subjugate yourself to the Babylon. But Tzidkiah did not follow the prophet Jeremiah, and as a result, he was waiting for Egyptian to give him a help. And what happened? The Egyptians betrayed. Why? Some rabbis said that they remember the splitting of the sea, the drowning on the sea, or other reasons, they didn't want to help, whatever it is. But that was a mistake that Tzidkiah made by not listening to the prophet Jeremiah and not subjugate himself to Babylon. 18. Tzadu tze'adeinu milechet birchovotenu. Two interpretations. One is Rashi. Rashi said here, he used the word tzadu. Tzad is like someone who's trying to dig out. So Rashi said, Oivenu arvu et tzadenu milechet birchovotenu, which means they are searching for us every place. It's like animals that knew that somebody's tried to hunt for them, and every place they go, they're afraid that somebody's going to hit. That's one way. I heard from the great Rabbi Schwartz, who said that he feels it's more appropriate to use the word tzaru. Tzaru is like they're getting close. It's like getting to a point of being surrendered. The Torah said, "V'no sha'atem," that you will be redeemed. And if you look carefully, the whole story, it was the kindness of Hashem, because it wasn't full annihilation. God had compassion upon us, and 2 years earlier, all this exile took place. Mal'u yameinu ki ba kitzeinu. Our end drew near, our days are done, for our ends has come. Which means that was blessing that this exile started 2 years earlier, so it was some compassion from God to save the remnant, as He promised. 19. Kalim hayu rodfeinu min ishrei shamayim. Our pursuers were swifter than eagles in the sky. Right? So, if you read the history, the Midrash tells us that it was Trachianus that he came to Egypt. His plan was to do it in 10 days, and all of a sudden his boat made it in 5 days. So he felt that since it happens half of time, that God is there. But the truth is, the Torah said that Yishlach Hashem alecha goy merachok, that Hashem, when it's a series of admonition, Hashem sent an enemy that come close, and the sign of enemy, sign of the wrong, is the eagle. They burn a forest because people cannot escape. That's the way they try to reach. Ruach apeinu, sentence 20, the breath of our nostrils, Hashem anointed. So there are several interpretations. One, they say that it speaks about Yoshiyahu, the king, that he will serve servant of God, and he was caught by all the corruption of his generation. He came to those houses and he was sure that is no idols. But people opened the door, and behind the door it was a tzelem, it was a idol, but he didn't recognize. Others said it's applied to King Tzidkiah, and others, the Rashbam, hold that that's applied to the fast of Gedailah, Gedailah ben Achikam, that when he said Ruach Hapeinu Mashiach Hashem, that the breath of our nostrils as Hashem anointed applied to Gedailah, that he tried to rehabilitate the community after the destruction, and it started some type of stability. But unfortunately, again, a fellow Jew by the name of Ishmael ben Netanya created all this clandestine plan to kill him, and he eventually killed him, and that was the end of the small remnant of the Jews that was still in the land. And that's the reason why basically we fast in the fast of Gedailah. Now the last two Pesukim is crucial, because the last two Pesukim speak about which we call the month of Av. The month of Av applies to two things. Aleph, it's Edom, the nation of Edom. The second is the second exile, it's called Bavel, the Babylon, two exiles. The two series of admonition, one is the end of book of Leviticus, Parshat Bechukotai, applied to the first Beit HaMikdash, the first temple. The second one, book of Deuteronomy, Kitavo, applied to the second temple. So here, we'd like to share with you the Nachmanides, the Ramban, who said in Parshas Toldot, and I quote word by word, he said, fascinating statement. It speaks about Isaac that dig a well. Vayashov Yitzchak vayachpor et be'erot hamayim, that Yitzchak dig a well of water. So the Ramban said, Yesaper hakatuv v'yarich be'inyan ha'be'erot, the sentence dealt at length with all these concepts of the well. ואין בפשוטי הסיפור תועלת ולא כבוד ליצחק. It's not speaking about anything related to Isaac in a sense of honor or recognition. אבל יש בה דבר עניין נסתר בתוכו. The Ramban said that is a secret within this. כי בא להודיע דבר עתיד, that is going to tell us something related to the future. כי באר מים חיים ירמוז לבית אלוקים, that the well of water applied to the house of the Lord. אשר יעשו בניו של יצחק, the descendants of Isaac will do, ולכן הזכיר באר מים חיים. כמו שאמר מקום מים חיים אל השם, which means that's the water, the Torah is the water, the Beis HaMikdash is like the water that we survive because of that. וקרא הראשון עסק, the first one that Yitzchak did, it's called עסק, ירמוז לבית הראשון, that's applied to the first Beis HaMikdash. אשר התעסקו עמו, Ramban said, ועשו אותנו כמה מחלוקות, that it created tremendous controversy, וכמה מלחמות עד שהחריבו, with several wars, and a war until they destroy it. והשניין, the second well, נקרא שמה סיטנה, it's called סיטנה, סיטנה is like hatred, it's like controversy. שם כושר מן הראשון, this is a word that it's much stronger than the first one. What does that mean, road? והוא הבית השני שקרא אותו בשמו. The Ramban said that that's applied to the second Beit HaMikdash, that he called it on his name. So what the Ramban said here, it's a very important Ramban and the story of Yitzchak. Why is called Vayikra Shema Be'er Esek? Why it's called two different names? So the Rambam said that Inyan Nistar Betocho is a secret within it. Why? Because he said the first Be'er, the Esek applied to the first Beit HaMikdash, and the second the Ramban said it's applied to the second Vayikra Shema Sitna. Sitna, it's like I heard from Rav Yoel Schwartz who said that Sitna is Leshon Sina, it's like the selfless hatred. So here the Ramban said that that's implication again for the destruction of second, שקרא אותו בשמו, שכתוב בו, that's the word Sitna, וכל ימיו היה לנו לשטן עד שיחרבו, that the time of the second Beit HaMikdash was a lot of selfless hatred, וגלו ממנו גלות רעה, and as a result, it was this was the Beit HaMikdash, the center of spirituality, the center of wisdom and kedusha and holiness and tremendous abundance to the nation of Israel and the whole world. But then he said, "Vashlishi kara rechovot," and the third well, Isaac called him rechovot. Hu habayit ha'atid sheibana b'mira b'yameinu. That's applied to the third Beit HaMikdash that will build speedily soon in our days. And that's the last two sentences I'm about to finish. In the last two sentences in this chapter, they said, Sisi v'simchi bat Edom. That's the conclusion of the chapter. These Jeremiah express, and he says that everything turned around from the suffering of Jerusalem, all this happiness of Edom. What is Edom? Edom, it's like Adom, it's red. Red is the sign of the flag of Russia. That's the sign, if you remember the story of Perestroika, the Warsaw Covenant, and all the story of this Edom. He said here, Sisi v'simchi bat Edom, he said, rejoice and exalt, O daughter of Edom, Yoshevet be'eretz Uz, who dwell in the land of Uz, to you too will the cup pass, you will be drunk and will vomit. What does that mean? Now you are happy because you conquer over the city of Jerusalem. But the end is the drunk. You know that the Russians like to drink, but that's beside. The end is going to be very bad, which means God is going to punish Edom by their sins. And that's what we said, Arninu Goim Amor, the nation were now happy to see our downfall will turn around for good. And that's what he promised, the last pasuk. Tam avonech bat Zion, lo yosif lagrotech. Your iniquities is expedited, O daughter of Zion. God will not exile you again. That's a promise that we see in our days, a return to our land. Pakad avonech bat Edom gilal chatotayich. God, remember your iniquity, daughter of Edom. He will uncover your sins. Which means that he's no longer exile. At the end, Hashem save us, the same as He saved us from Pharaoh, from Amalek, He saved us. And that's what Ezekiel tells us. He used the word nafriach shmama, that we are built from the desolation. Tam avonech, your sin is finished. Which means tam, it's not, in a sense, it's not past tense, it's expression in the past but present too. He like express a request that all this sorrow will be end, and we'll see it soon. And that's what the Ramban concluded in his interpretation. He says the third Beit HaMikdash is called Rechovot, U'abayit ha'atid she'yibaneh b'mira b'yameinu. We believe that Tisha B Av will turn around when we build the third Beit HaMikdash. V'hu ya'aseh belo riv u'matzah. It will build without any fights and disputations. And he said, Ve'akel yarchiv et gvuleinu, that Hashem will extend our land. כמו שנאמר, ואם ירחיב השם את גבולך, שכל העמים יעבדו שכם אחד. That we turn around, that all the nation recognize God is one, His name is one, and that will happen as He promised at the end of this chapter, that Hashem will speedily soon build the Beis HaMikdash b'mehera b'yameinu. Amen.